This is 6, and as we do every day, I'd like to ask everybody who can stand to stand so we do the national pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Agenda additions, deletions, and amendments. Council with no objection. Mr. Wolf, please ask us to move item E off consent agenda to a very quick move it to A on new business because it just has a word issue on that. So here, no objection, we'll do that. Anybody sign up to speak on citizen participation?
No, sir.
All right, thank you. Under council announcement, the only thing I have is to remind people the National Night Out is tomorrow night at Allen Pond from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Come on, it'll be a great opportunity to spend the evening with the Bowie Police Department and a variety of chamber events and folks, and a fun evening, and the weather's going to cooperate. I'm absolutely certain of that. Okay. Mr. City Manager?
Oh, I have no report this evening, sir. Thank you.
All right. All right, Council, consent agenda items A through D. Do I have a motion? Moved by Mr. Wolfley, second by Mr. Marcos. Any question on the motion? All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous. New business item, what was E is Ordinance 0718, amending the Building and Permanent Maintenance, Housing and Maintenance Code. Mr. Wolfley, you had a question?
Yeah, it's just a quick question on the new language for the building and property ordinance. Right now, the language reads, have electrical and water service. And the only question I had was, how does that relate to those properties that don't actually use water service? They have well and septic, and if that language still remains ambiguous in those circumstances. That's the only question I have. Like, city attorney, I guess, is the proper respondent.
My understanding from your code enforcement department is that that has not been an issue, and I believe the issue is the house habitable? So is there water, whether it comes from wells or from another source? They need to have running water.
Okay. But the terms that are in there that we have, it says, you know, that we have electrical service and that we have water service. Could someone interpret that to mean that it does not necessarily include septic and well as acceptable?
No one has to date. These changes were initiated at the request of code enforcement to address concerns that they have encountered in the issuance of tickets. We can certainly consult with them and determine whether or not they believe that might be a problem that also needs to be addressed.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that we're covered because
Certainly.
We do have some properties that do in fact have water that is well water, and I don't want somebody getting being concerned that it's ambiguous.
Forest Drive, that are still well and septic.
Well, the well water and septic are certainly a standard, an acceptable standard within the civil engineering world. And in every city I worked in, you could either have septic and well or city water and sewer, as long as you had one of each and they all met the standards set by the city.
All right. I'm perfectly fine with it, just so long as it meets so long as we haven't created new ambiguities with the distinction of it being service.
We don't believe that'll be an issue, sir.
All right, thank you.
So you want to make a motion to adopt?
Motion to adopt the resolution as proposed.
Second by Mr. Marcos. Any question on the motion? All in favor? Opposed?
Excuse
Unanimous?
me, Mayor, we got to rescind that motion. This was just for introduction tonight. It won't get adopted till the September meeting.
I'd like to make a motion to rescind the last motion.
Second. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous?
Thank
We
you.
okay now? All right, item new business, city transportation priority list.
Good evening, Mayor. For the record, Joe Meinert, Planning Director, and I'm here tonight to share with you the city's transportation priority list, which you do every year. You send letters to the county executive and the state delegation indicating the city council's transportation priorities. What we also would like to do tonight is just briefly touch on some of the aspects of the Bowie Heritage Trail project, because I know council is not as familiar with that, and I'd like to just brief you for a few moments on it. As you're aware, the transportation planning process includes 4 steps, and the 4 steps involve project planning, design and engineering, right-of-way acquisition, and construction. Those are usually separately funded steps. The council's highest transportation priorities have been for years the same projects: Maryland Route 197, which is number 4 on the county's priority list; Maryland 450, which is number 6 on the county's priority list; and then Church Road is the highest priority for county road facilities. And these are detailed in the memo that you have from us dated August 2nd. Council has also in the past indicated the desire to see a new interchange on US 50 at Maryland 193, and that affects traffic flow, would affect the traffic flow on 197 as well as 450, and that was studied at the time Route 450 was widened. So that interchange is a critical point in the regional transportation system. Another project is the council has advocated for a new roadway connecting Maryland 197 near Bowie State University with Maryland Route 3 in Anne Arundel County. And that's a regional project that we've included text in our letters to the state and county asking for their support of this concept. Currently, the state has several projects in their program for Bowie. The 450 project is currently about 95% engineered, and that's taking the road from Stony Brook Drive out to west of Maryland Route 3 and upgrading it to a multi-lane divided road. The second project that's funded in the state's program is Maryland 197 from US 50 to Maryland 450, and that's about 30% engineered. That's the project that council's highest priority is council's highest priority. Within the project planning category of the state consolidated transportation program, there's a project for Maryland Route 3, upgrading from Route US 50 to the Anne Arundel County line. That project is on hold. It has been on hold for years. Again, also the Route 301-197 interchange down in the vicinity of the RIPS business. That project is also on hold and has been on hold for years. There's an approved project planning design that council supported. There's also a Route 301 South Corridor transportation study, which the state really hasn't funded for years, and so that planning project is on hold. But those are all projects that appear in the state's consolidated transportation program, and council has supported them in some form over the years. Our recommendations for state projects are the same as what they've been in the past. Continue to recommend funding for Maryland Route 197, to bring funds for not only design and engineering but for construction as soon as possible. The Maryland Route 450 project that I described, trying to move that up into right-of-way and construction. The interchange in the RIPS area, we're recommending that that be moved, funded for design and engineering funding. It's currently finished with project planning, as I said. The Route 3 project, move that to design and engineering. That would be the next logical step. And council has in the past recommended a project to upgrade US 301 going south from Excalibur Road all the way to Leland Road to provide funding for interim capacity improvements on both the northbound and the southbound lanes. So that's been council's position. In addition to that, council has recommended public transit via the US 50 corridor, and we've included that in our previous letters to the state. I mentioned the US 50 193 intersection and also the roadway near the Bowie State University. So those are all recommendations which are going to be contained in the draft letters to the state. We also supported Hall Road and completing the pedestrian sidewalk extension from the CSX railroad tracks over to Pointer Ridge Drive. As you know, the state and the city partnered in getting the sidewalk constructed west of the railroad tracks to provide safe access to the library. So we're looking to now complete that project from the CSX tracks over to Pointer Ridge Drive. And then the final project that the council has continually supported is the Maryland Route 197 North landscaping retrofit. And this is taking the center lane of Maryland 197 north of 450 and creating a landscape median with turn lanes. And there was a concept plan done about 15 years ago working with the community, and that is a project that council's continued to support, but the state claims that there's not enough funding to do that project. In terms of county transportation projects, there are a number of trail efforts that the county is doing related to the WB&A trail, and that's up in the vicinity of Bowie State University. They've extended the WB&A Spur Trail. That was completed about a year ago. They've also funded bridge replacements on Chestnut Avenue and Governor's Bridge Road. There's funding in the park and planning portion of the county budget for the Collington Branch Stream Valley Park, which is related to the Hall Road sidewalk project that I just described. And park and planning is actually the property owner that owns all the land between the railroad tracks and Pointer Ridge Drive, so they're going to be a partner in funding some of those improvements. Church Road, as I mentioned, the Route 301 improvements, and the WB&A Bridge over the Patuxent River. These are all funded projects in one form or another that appear in the county's capital improvement program. The city's recommendations for county transportation projects is to add Church Road from Leland Road to Maryland Route 450, the whole length of Church Road, to the construction program. Currently, it's in the beyond 6 years category for planning, and there really is no funding currently to do anything. The second road project listed there is to add Mitchellville Road from US 301 up to Mount Oak Road to design and engineering. And we think that is a promising possibility that in our discussions with the county staff, they are taking a very serious look at that. And I think you've heard from Mr. Beckert when he was here talking about Racetrack Road. He is also the one looking at Mitchellville Road. So we're hoping to get that into the capital program, and it's included in the letter this year. The third project is the Racetrack Road project, to continue funding for that. It's not a separate CIP project, but there's funding allocated in the county budget. And then fourth, a project that the council's repeatedly asked for is upgrading Old Stage Road as a construction project. And as you know, as the Fairwood development builds out in the back and it connects into Old Stage Road, there will be a lot more traffic using the full length of Old Stage Road. There are a number of transportation sidewalk and trail projects that we've recommended as far as the county is concerned. A number of those relate to the Heritage Trail System up in the Old Town Bowie area. We've also repeatedly asked for improvements for sidewalks in Old Town Bowie on the county-maintained roads, Old Laurel Bowie Road, Chestnut Avenue, and Duckettown Road. We'd like to recommend also in the past to the county that they participate with the city in creating an off-road trail system west of the city in the vicinity of Woodmore Estates. And I have a map that will show the location of that here in a minute. And then the fourth project is to request the county and Park and Planning's funding for a new pedestrian bridge across Maryland 214 in accordance with the citywide trails plan that would connect to the South Lake project. This map here shows the first project I mentioned, which is west of the city. The CSX Railroad is located here on the right-hand side, but the red line is the proposed trail system along the A44 right-of-way, and it goes through Woodmore Estates, crosses over Mount Oak Road, Mount Oak Farm, Woodmore Highlands. So this would really provide an off-road trail system in a park-like setting for the residents of our community. And the last project that I mentioned was the pedestrian bridge across Maryland 214. This is Maryland 214. The area that's circled would be potentially the location where it would cross, and it's between Hall Road. Hall Road is to the left side of the drawing. Hall Road and Pointer Ridge Drive here. On the other side would be Pensbury Drive, which does connect up all the way over to 301. So you'd have the potential to connect and unite those communities on the north side by some sort of ramping system, and then an actual bridge perpendicular to the road, which would cross from all of this park and planning property on the north side across to the south side where the county owns land adjacent to South Lake, and then you'd have a ramping system bringing you down into the South Lake project. So that's our recommendation with the trail system. Council has also recommended transit priorities in previous letters, and I won't go through all of the specifics here, but we're again repeating those. We think one of the best candidates here for funding in the future would be to try to get the county to establish a route for the bus, which is the county-operated transit system, to create a downtown circulator route which would serve the Bowie Center, Bowie Town Center, Covington, and Melford. So we've actually participated and made comments in the county's transit plan update just this past year and indicated that this is one of the council's highest priorities. Our intention is to provide a letter to council with all of these comments written in, as I mentioned, to our state and county officials. We could either do that through the package, or if council wants to put it on the consent agenda in September, we could also do that. The last thing I wanted to do, Mayor, is to talk just briefly about the Bowie Heritage Trail and provide a few details for you so that you can be up to speed with this project. If it would, I don't know, I guess. Mayor, I'm not going to be able to present the. I'm not going to be able to present the Heritage Trail slides. It's not working this evening.
Oh, okay. What do you want to do? Just include that in there? You have any oral observation for it?
What'd you say, sir? What we'll do is we'll send them out. Is he going to try to get it to work?
We're working on it.
Okay.
Okay. All right, I have one person sign up to speak. I'm sorry? Thank you, Mark. Oh, you got it? Oh, okay.
Okay, I did want to provide council with just a brief overview of what we call Phase 2 of the Bowie Heritage Trail Project. This is a project that was funded in the budget last year, and at the last minute in your deliberations for this year's budget, council decided to set aside the funding and not fund it. But I thought it would be important, since this is a transportation project, to bring you up to speed with the design that we've come to, because the project is 100% designed. We have permits in hand. We were ready to go out and build this. This would be an enhancement to the trail that's getting ready to go under construction now. Let me just describe the project to you. This slide shows you the overview of the area, and you can see in the blue line, this is the Heritage Trail that's been planned. Currently, the construction is planned to begin this month at the southern end at 12th Street. The Knights of St. John building is here. There's a public parking lot on 12th Street. And so the trail will start here, the construction will start here in about 3 weeks. It'll go north along the CSX Railroad behind the Railroad Museum property. There'll be a retaining wall constructed, and the trail will go underneath the Maryland 564 bridge over to the east side of the bridge onto city-owned property at the cul-de-sac at 10th Street. The future project will actually extend the trail along the railroad tracks up to the cul-de-sac of 9th Street. So what I wanted to do is give you an overview of the design plans for Phase 2. Phase 2 is the area that we're talking about that includes the Railroad Museum property itself, as well as that city-owned property on the northeast side of Maryland 564 at the end of 10th Street. As you can see here in blue, there's already an existing path that comes down and connects the intersection of 11th Street down to 10th Street. This slide shows the overall project that I'm talking about, referring to as Phase 2. Phase 2 of the Heritage Trail involves improvements to the Railroad Museum on the southwest side, and then a new playground and park project on the northeast side. Looking very briefly at the plan for the Railroad Museum, the concept is to create a new educational plaza behind the existing freight depot building. It would involve the construction of a pergola with perforated art sculptures. This would be designed in the form of a train roundhouse using pavered materials. It would include seating and places for educational displays to take place. Most obviously, the caboose, the existing caboose, would be relocated from its current position over here near the railroad tracks to just to the side of this plaza, so that it would have handicapped accessibility for people to come directly from the plaza into the caboose car itself. There's also a trail connection that would come down. It would resemble a railroad connection down to the main Heritage Trail, which I described earlier, which is going to be built later this year. A train watching platform would be constructed where the current caboose is located now, right behind the existing tower. So there is a train watching group presence out there, and we wanted to provide a decent place for that to happen. Landscaping as well. There's going to be rain gardens, all native plants, screening behind the pergola building, bioretention areas, and planting along the railroad tracks. This is a quick view or cutaway view of the pergola structure. As I mentioned, it will be an opportunity for learning, serves as a backdrop for educational displays. This is an example of the perforated art. There would be 3 bays, and each one of the bays would have a perforated art design of a period train locomotive. Behind the existing freight depot, the plan calls for a series of crates and materials resembling a waiting area along a train depot. So it would make the back end of the building a little more attractive and add to the atmosphere when viewed from that plaza. Here's a zeroed-in picture of the plaza showing the brick patterns, which are intended to resemble railroad tracks coming in. It's all paver material. There's no metal involved. And then you can see the distribution of some of the benches and chairs and tables. Now, the other side of the railroad, or the other side of Maryland 564, is what we call the 10th Street Park. And the 10th Street Park will have a railroad theme, and what you would have coming under the 564 bridge, you would enter into the park area by way of a trestle bridge, like an old-fashioned railroad trestle bridge, which would cross over a very minor swale. You'd come down into the area where there'd be a playground, a train locomotive climber for kids to climb on. There's open play areas within this area. There's a couple of very large trees, oak trees on this property, and this is a climber structure which will allow kids to climb up high so that they could feel and appreciate the tree canopy around them. This is an example of the trestle bridge that's been designed for this project. And then as you were heading further into the property, there's also additional play seesaws and swings, different playground equipment. There's a couple of handicap parking spaces along 10th Street that would be new. And then a natural play area, which is within the tree environment for kids to basically play with the logs and other natural materials as they enjoy the park. Also, this project has 7 structures that are being built in this portion, this central portion, which would be historic replica structures of iconic Old Town Bowie buildings. And there's 7 of those. And the idea is to really preserve the heritage of Bowie and to allow visitors to appreciate the architecture of those buildings. And what these are 3-sided shed-type buildings, and they will be stick-built and finished to look like all of the the buildings in Old Town that are the most iconic. So the architect, the designer has come up with actual plans for this, and they would be bid out and constructed. The Ross Memorial Church, the Bowie Building and Loan Building, the Straining House, the old Bowie Fire Station, the old Bowie School Site, the Lures Right Store, and then finally at the Weight Shed, the plan calls for a couple of statues to be included there. There's a statue of a woman and a small child and a small bag, reminiscent of someone just waiting for the next train to arrive. The last thing that's included in the plan, and I did mention we do have permits for all of these things, is some artwork on both sides of the Maryland 564 abutments along the railroad tracks. And so there's a mural of a more late model train to go on the north side, the north embankment. And then on the southern embankment, which is where the Heritage Trail will go underneath, you would have this silhouette type design of a horse and carriage and a bicycle rider. So in closing, I just wanted to give you the flavor of the types of things that have been designed for this project. It is about $1 million of construction cost to design this or to actually build what you've seen in these plans. But we feel that there's support for this. We've worked with the Huntington Heritage Society. They support it. We've done several community meetings at the Lions Club up there. They support it. And we are just asking for council to consider funding this project in the next fiscal year. And with that, Mayor, I'm concluding my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. All right. I have one person signed up to speak before we do the questions. That Mr. Swank?
It's all right. I just signed up in case somebody was.
Okay. All right, then that's all the people I've signed up to speak. And public hearings. There's questions of staff. Mr. Wolfram?
I have a few questions. On the 197 improvements between Harbor, the 301-197 intersection, and we've got interim improvements that are kind of going in parallel. What's the status? Last I heard, there was some design work. Do we have any inkling as to funding? Has there been any discussions about that from the state?
The 301-197 interchange went through project planning, and council supported a specific plan for that. That project has been on hold by the state, so there's really no effort being made to do any of those parts of it. There may be some widening of 301 that the state is doing as a separate project.
Right, and that's what I'm speaking to. Have you heard anything about funding or timing on those interim efforts?
That's a project that we're trying to find out more about, actually. District 3 was working on it. I'm not sure that they're working on it now, but the plan was to bring a third lane southbound from Harbor Way through Heritage so that there wouldn't be that bottleneck there where it drops, so that you could open the traffic up and have 3 continuous lanes going southbound. So that was the concept, but I'm unaware of the current status.
All right. Were they going to do anything northbound?
I don't think that was part of the plan.
Okay. All right. But they were going to repave. No, repaving's all taken care of. Okay.
Yes.
The next question is on the improvements on 301. Can you speak to the obligations and whether they've been fulfilled for the Carrington development for their contribution to that thoroughfare?
Well, there is a condition of approval on their preliminary plan of subdivision that requires them to provide a third through lane going southbound in front of their property. And so that's something that is indexed to the inflation so that the cost of it will stay current, and that they will have to make those improvements prior to getting occupancy of their project.
All right. So if memory serves me, there is a third lane there now. Is that not correct?
No, there's only 2 lanes
Only
going
2 there?
south of Central Avenue, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. And then the what was the last thing we heard on the the landscaping for 197. Was there any indication that there was interest in picking that up? I guess, how big a reach is that, is the question?
From what I understand, Councilman, the state has a very small amount of money statewide that they can devote to these types of beautification projects. So it's a highly competitive situation, and I think we're just being out-competed by other jurisdictions. Baltimore City comes to mind. So it's one of those things where if the state could do it, they would try, but every time we ask, they just say that they're not able to fund it.
And if memory serves me, the plan is to put a small median where the suicide lane is right now?
Yes, that was the concept, and provide turn lanes to make it safer for people to turn and cross the road.
Okay. The next question I have for you is this project from 197 over to Maryland 3, to the road that would connect the Anne Arundel to 197 cut through. I thought that one went by the boards, but is it still alive as a possibility?
Well, it's alive as far as your transportation priority list letters. We did write a letter, and the Prince George's County Executive Baker wrote a letter back to the city and said he would support that concept.
Okay.
I don't think we've ever gotten any real feedback, positive or negative, from the state, but it's in our letter every year, so that might be a project that if council felt was important enough that maybe we should highlight it a little more in the letter that's going. But it is something council felt very strongly about for the reasons that you stated.
Mm-hmm. Could you elaborate a little bit on the bridge over 214? Carrington, that's basically crossing over in what would become Carrington, whatever, it's going to be South Lake or what have you. Any indication that the developers could pay for that? It seems to me that would be a connection that would be tied into their development to enhance and connect with the existing community.
Well, more than likely, that's not going to happen. We were looking to Park and Planning to move ahead with this because it's technically actually outside the city limits. They own land on the north side, and the county government owns land on the south side. So we feel there's other parts of Prince George's County where the commission has built bridges and underpasses, and we feel that this would be a pretty well-warranted location because of the reasons that I mentioned. You'd be connecting two neighborhoods on the north side using commission property, and then you'd be connecting over into the new development. Okay. It has been council's policies for years to look at an overpass of Central Avenue. At one point, it was down in the Collington Station area, but that road eventually got signalized, and so there's a pedestrian crossing at grade. We looked at using the 844 right-of-way down in that area, but it just was not a convenient kind of it was not a real viable location. This location seems like it would solve multiple needs, and we think that, you know, you'd be providing, say, the Pennsbury neighborhood an easy way to get over to the library, safe, and also provide a grade separated option, which would be much safer for the residents to go north and south.
Yeah. The project that you mentioned, the trail that you spoke to just a couple minutes ago in Old Bowie, I understand that, you know, a lot of that property is ours, and a lot of the park area I wouldn't expect Park and Planning to chip in on. But how about the trail? Could we put that on their docket and see if they could take care of putting the trail portion in as part of the trail network and part of the greater regional area commitment to bike trails?
Well, it is on their agenda to build more trails throughout the county. That's one of the focuses of their Formula 2040 plan that was approved by the county. What they are doing is they're trying to build complementary segments to the city's segments. And so out near the WB&A where it crosses the river, you know, there's going to be a bridge connection over into Anne Arundel. So Prince George's is working with Anne Arundel on that. They completed the spur trail, which goes north of that towards the back end of Bowie State University. and they have a project of their own called the Bowie Heritage Trail that will connect from that point into the campus over to the MARC station. So they're cooperating with us there. They're also cooperating with us up in the Jericho Park area where the city is moving ahead, or we had planned to move ahead with a project again that was recommended for funding this fiscal year, and council deferred that, the Jericho Park segment. That's about $600,000, no, $360,000. But Park and Planning, in answer to your question there, was willing to reimburse the city up to $100,000 for the portion of the trail that we're going to build on their property. So I believe there is a lot of cooperation. I think there should be more. There's other segments that we think that are outside the city that only they can advance because the city won't really build trails outside of our limits. And so I'd say we're doing our part and they're working on doing their part. And I think it's very complementary, the relationship that we have.
Looking at that proposal, you said it was going to run about $1 million, I think for the out year. What percentage of that is trail-related cost versus park and other? So maybe it gets bifurcated. Maybe we tackle the trail component first to tie in with other things, because I suspect that that's, maybe a couple $100,000 of the total. And if we're getting $100,000 back for the county, that would be a good fiscal solution to saving some money in the short term.
That's one way to look at it, and there is a lot of grading and site work that has to be done regardless, and so there could be a potential examination of that, breaking out the trail piece first. That's something we could look at.
Okay. Thank you. Let me see if I have anything else here. I just want to make a comment. Oh yes, on 197, I have two comments. The first one is on 197, Route 3 with the intersection at Forest Drive. Did the city get an invite for the meeting that was held on that?
I'm not aware of a recent meeting, no.
Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. I got a last-minute notice from a constituent indicating that they had received an indication they'd received a letter, and there was going to be a stakeholder meeting for that improvement, to discuss that improvement. Unfortunately, I was unable to attend because I learned of it too late, and I had a prior commitment. And I was concerned when I heard that no one from the city was involved either. Can you reach out to the State Highway Administration and see if they can't schedule something where we can have a proper discussion where the city is engaged as well? Because I have a couple of concerns about how that process has been evolving. I think there was some feeling that it was all a fait accompli and there was going to be no opportunity for basically taking consideration of what the citizen concerns were, and I think we ought to, do a little bit better service on that. So if you could reach out for them, that would be great. The other is we spent a lot of time on the roads and construction and so forth. I just want to reiterate, and maybe we can move up the importance on the list for the WMATA improvements in service, because I know that we have from time to time complaints from folks saying that the service levels for the bus services that come through don't run often enough to be reliable from a scheduling standpoint. They may be reliable for showing up when they're supposed to, but there aren't enough of them to feel comfortable in relying on that as a mode. And I think that would be important to move up. I know we have it on the list, but I think that would be good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Any other questions?
Just two real quick ones. I want to echo what Councilman, sorry, I don't have my glasses on. Where are you, Joe? There you are, Joe. Hi. Thanks again for your presentation tonight. I want to echo what Councilman Wolfley said with regards to the Heritage Trail project in the park in Huntington. If there is any way that we could potentially separate out just the trail portions of the project from the more aesthetic side, I like the overall design a lot. I like the aesthetic project, and I definitely want to see it completed over time. But given budget constraints, I think there's probably a good chance that, you know, we're going to have to take a look at this again. So I just want to echo the really good point that Councilman Wolfley made on that, which I agree with. And the second thing is I just want to thank you again for including, I'm seeing we were able to add in Old Bowie the looking at sidewalks expanded through Old Laurel Bowie Road, Chestnut, and Ducketttown. Actually, it just dawned on me as a point of clarification. When we refer to Ducketttown Road, are we talking about, and the road configuration in Old Bowie is a mess, so I'm actually looking at the map right now just to be sure. So we talk about Ducketttown Road, but I think one of the areas where residents would like to see an improvement would be along, I think it would actually technically be Lanham Severn, and there are portions of the street there where a sidewalk would need to be replaced. I think they're actually working on a project now immediately in front of the fire station there, Station 19. But along there, I think there are concerns about sidewalk that's kind of been getting old and falling apart a little bit. But otherwise, I appreciated your including the request for the sidewalk improvements around that area. They've been steadily making improvements there, and I know residents will appreciate improved walkability, and I appreciate that. That's all I had.
Any other questions, Dr. Trout?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Minor, the overpass over 214, you mentioned that going between Hall Road and Pennsbury, is that correct?
Yes, the idea would be that you'd have a bridge that would cross over 214, just like the bridge out here that crosses Route 197, but you have to have ramps that go up to it, and you'd be able to connect on the park and planning property, the Pennsbury Drive area with the Hall Road area. Currently, there's no way to get from one to the other. You have to come out onto the road of 214 and go along the shoulder, and it's very unsafe for residents that want to go to or from those neighborhoods. So you have an opportunity to build a bridge and ramp system that would address all of those needs.
I'd like to see if we can get an assessment from the residents in that area, because I'd like to know if it's more important to have a pedestrian bridge going over 214, spending money for that at the state level. That is a state project, right?
It's a state right-of-way, yes.
So it's a state project, versus not having any improvements on northbound 301 when you have a big project coming over there known as Carrington, also AKA South Lake. I think we're impacting more people on 301 than we would be impacting on 214 by having a pedestrian bridge versus the congestion that we know that we already experience, and we know that it's going to be exacerbated 10-4, maybe 10 times more, because I don't see anything here with the project for Carrington, AKA South Lake, that is indicating that there's going to be any improvements whatsoever on northbound 301, and northbound 301 is a parking lot now. They're also asking, I know we're going to get involved in this a little bit later on, but they're also asking for 695 additional units. So I'm just wondering, where are we going with this? I'm at a loss. I don't see where the bridge is as important as getting another lane on 301, the pedestrian bridge. Not a bridge where you have vehicular traffic, but this is just a pedestrian bridge. And to go from Pennsbury to Hall Road, you don't need a bridge. They're all on the same side of 214. So I'm at a loss for that.
Are you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Any other questions? That certainly makes a lot of sense about, priorities. That's a priority difference there is astronomical. versus, you know, your comments make a whole lot of sense.
Oh, I was hoping they would. I'm just trying to figure out why are we
Yeah.
not asked?
I understand.
problem
It's
with
just
the
two, it's
right?
two different issues, but we gotta go at it.
Yeah, but which
Twist
one
it
is
in.
the bigger issue? I mean, if
Oh,
you got a finger that's bleeding and you
There's
got
no,
your
there's
hand
no
that's cutting off,
question,
what are you
there's
gonna
no
do?
question which one
Take
is
care of
the
your
higher
hand
priority.
first, right?
Yeah, okay, but I appreciate that. Any other questions or comments on staff's recommendation? All right, then you have a recommendation from staff to include all the recommendations that we have channeled into them, and they responded back on the state transportation projects and the county projects. And they want to make a motion to,
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
I'm sorry?
We're making a motion in order to approve, then I'd like to make a motion to approve the transportation priority list that we have discussed tonight.
Second by Mr. Gardner. Any question on the motion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous.
Nay, I can't go along with this when we got this bridge here versus trying to increase 301.
Well,
I have to
Okay,
show
all
my
right.
disapproval on it.
okay, it's
It
noted,
doesn't make sense to me.
understand, I think, you know, we've got a couple other avenues we can explore as well.
Well, let's
So it's
get those
6-1.
used.
6-1, thank you. All right, item B, our item last is Carrington South Lake staff present items related to project including administrative matters. Welcome,
Good
sir.
evening.
Good evening.
This is your chance to see if the hearing component of your health plan is going to protect you against this direct approach. Yes, speak this way because of our common background. Folks, we've got a couple of actions for you tonight. I'm going to split them up. Both relate to administrative matters surrounding things that you have done regarding Carrington and things that you might be doing regarding Carrington. The first item I want to bring up is Resolution 5618. You'll remember way back in 2016, you approved an annexation agreement with the owners of the Carrington property to bring at some point in the future that property into the city. As staff has been working with them along the process to bring that property in, we identified a need to clarify responsibilities surrounding stormwater. Some of the terms of the annexation agreement perhaps could be in conflict with things that needed to be done in order to ensure proper stormwater management procedures are put in place, things are permitted and inspected and maintained going forward, as well as some of the street maintenance going forward. Things we probably didn't think about in the detail at the time of the annexation agreement, but became apparent to both parties. That has resulted in a letter from the Carrington interests to the city agreeing to certain modifications to interpretation of the annexation agreement that specifically allow us to proceed with various aspects of stormwater, the permitting, and the future maintenance of it, should it be annexed into the city, as well as to do certain maintenance of the streets. It's a very simple, straightforward administrative matter. We're asking tonight for your permission to let the city manager sign on behalf of the city accepting this amendment. That's it.
Mr. Mayor, this isn't an amendment, this is a letter that stipulates, this isn't an amendment.
It's a letter amending allowing us, it's an administrative amendment.
Right, these stipulations here in A, B, and C on the letter, what they do is they give us complete control of the stormwater management of any potential, any developments in the Carrington South Lake process. We have all the approval authority, we have the authority to develop special tax districts if we need to do so, and control all aspects of stormwater at our standards, not the standards of the county.
Do we have, this is on the public hearing thing, right? Okay, do we have anybody signed up to speak on this one? Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Swank, good to see you, sir.
Mr. Mayor, council members, no objection to this one item.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, public hearing, all right, Any questions of staff on the letter?
Very briefly, thank you for joining us, Mr. King. Good to see you. Just for the folks at home and for their edification, the agreement that we have with Carrington at this point is tentative, essentially, right? And in the, I don't remember if it was for this particular one or the next resolution we're going to look at, but in the supporting documents, it reiterated that, you know, this isn't, we haven't formally as a city entered into a TIF. We're not committing to enter into a TIF yet. We still have a lot of work that we're doing with the county to see if that makes sense. And so just for when we talk about the TIF agreement of 2016.
Sir, if your question is about the TIF, may I ask that you hold it till we enter into the next resolution?
Resolution part 2. Okay.
The annexation, you're correct. The annexation agreement is something unusual and unique for the city. It's what we can, I think, fairly term a conditional agreement. The property does not annex into the city unless the city chooses, after its process has been followed,
Right.
to grant tax increment financing
Right.
there. So, but notwithstanding that, we have to proceed to set up our ability to administer.
Correct. And I just wanted to make
Should
sure I've been getting emails over the weekends from folks asking us,
No,
like,
this change, you are no more committed at the end of this evening
Right.
to providing money to Carrington or ultimately bringing them into the city than you were when you entered into the room tonight.
Cool. And I just want to make sure
It
that
changes
was,
no decisions that you've made previously.
and just want to make sure that was on the record. We're all good. But yeah, I've got no problem with the amendment. No, thank you.
Dr. Trout?
Yes, with the amendment, the understanding is that this amendment does not make any changes as far as what we've already agreed on.
That's correct.
But there is a difference with regard to our obligation as far as our Public Works Department, if you read between the lines. True?
It is an obligation we want for the effective administration of the property that would be brought into the city.
Is that obligation that we want tied just to the storm water management? Or is that obligation that we want also included with regard to street maintenance?
It has some street design and inspection matters. The street maintenance is an item to be subsequently negotiated.
That's where I'm going.
Well, just before we go any further, this is specifically about stormwater, and as we move forward, this is not an amendment to the annexation agreement. This is a stipulation on the part of the developer that we control all aspects of stormwater, period.
Not the street maintenance, because.
No, the answer to your question is no.
Okay.
It has nothing to do with street maintenance. This is about stormwater. At some point, if we in fact approve the TIF, development happens, it becomes annexed into the city, we will own the street maintenance, every aspect of public works for that development, just like any other development.
Okay, do we really want that? Do we want to take on the task of street maintenance?
Well, if
Because that's additional expenses.
That's it, and that's
It's going to hit our Public Works Department, which means our budget is going to be increased.
Well, any aspects of anything that we annex and become responsible for as a city, we will be responsible for the public works aspect, the police aspects of it, the code aspects, everything. That's a standard annexation responsibility of a city. Now, whether we want to do it or not, it's up to the city council.
Right.
But but if we do it, we will be accountable for everything that we're accountable for here now.
Let me drill down a little bit. This development has multiple zonings. Maybe I'm incorrect in my thinking, but my thinking is if it's commercial or if it's industrial, Public Works does not have a responsibility. But if it's residential, Public Works does. And you have multiple zonings in this particular project, some of which is going to be commercial/industrial. Well, some of we know it's going to be commercial. Now, if we're talking about the residential part of it, maintaining the streets in the residential part, but I don't see where it has been articulated here to divide that up so that there's a clear understanding of that.
This would not address that at all. This has nothing to do with what you're talking about at all.
Okay.
What you're talking about is whether we want to annex the property or not, and we want to enter into the development. Because if we enter into it and we annex it, we will be responsible for the maintenance of the streets and policing and code enforcement in total.
I hear what you're saying, and I think I hear what you're saying, I think I understand what you're saying, but my question is, I'm trying to drill down a little bit more with regard to, yes, if we annex it, we are responsible for X, Y, and Z. If we
annex it.
Okay, but let's say we annex the warehouses on Leland Road. Are we responsible for the street maintenance on Leland Road?
Well,
Because that's industrial. That's industrial.
if we annex the area and the streets are public roads, we're responsible for them, yes.
Okay, all right. I didn't have that understanding.
Regardless of what the zone is.
Okay,
If the roads are public, we own them.
okay. All right,
Any other questions?
no.
I want to start off by saying I want to make sure I have a good understanding of what this first resolution resolves us to accomplish. My understanding is that it provides for clarity in being able to set up a special taxing ability for the stormwater management. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's going to cost us to maintain stormwater. This will allow us to subsequently have a mechanism whereby we will receive revenue for that maintenance.
Right. Now, as an administrative matter, I don't have an objection to that. I think obviously we would be inheriting a stormwater responsibility associated, and I don't have a problem with that. I do have a concern with this, however, because of moving forward with an administrative matter when I think that there's been a change in the scope of what the developers at Carrington want to do. We had some email exchanges a month ago about the change in the number of units that were anticipated. And I see that as a meaningful, substantive change in the project and in the proposal, ranging from, hold on a second, here's the numbers, 1,388 to 1,900 units, which is about 500 units more than what we last heard, and would represent like a 37% increase in residential, which to me is tremendously significant. And when you look at the traffic issues that we've been dealing with, we talked about earlier in the traffic planning, we all know the shortage of asphalt in the area, and a whole host of other things, everything from schools and whatnot. So I am concerned with us moving forward on administrative issues such as this, with there being such a significant change in the scope of what the folks at Carrington want to do. And I think that we really aren't in a position to have, to move these things forward until we can come to terms as to scope of what the project should be. When the annexation agreement was signed, that was part of what the agreement was that understanding of that level of burden on the community, and that appears to be changing, at least in their desires. And if we can't come to terms with whether or not the new number is acceptable, moving forward with administrivia, to me, isn't a good use of time. I think we need to, resolve whether or not they have truly committed to what, standing up to what they said before, or if they've moved the goalposts in terms of the numbers. So that's my objection to moving forward with this at present.
Mr. Mayor, let me help with this if I could. This is a minute, we are moving forward with the process. However, in October, the developer will be required to present the preliminary plan of subdivisions to the planning board, the county. Prior to that, in late September, most likely the second meeting in September, that document and those plans will be brought forth to the city council for approval. There's been no official stipulation by the developer that larger number that I warned you of is in fact going to be the real number, and we'll know that then. And then if at that point the city council wants to wants to extricate itself from the process, it can do that then. To do it now would be in advance of the developer officially saying, I want 1,900 units as opposed to 1,300. So it's very likely it could happen that by that time they would have come to their senses and realized that those are really high numbers for the city of Bowie, and adjust their numbers to what was originally planned on, which was somewhere at or below 1,300. But presently, we have not, they have not stipulated that they want that 600 plus units more. If we aren't able to proceed here with either this document and the next document, which allows me to accept the advance fees, just for the record, this will officially stop our involvement in the process. Because absent the approval for especially regarding to our ability to utilize the fees, we will not be able to spend any more money to evaluate the TIF process or the bonding process or the legal aspects of this plan. Well,
I think that, I actually think that that's all, that's very useful and very helpful information. And I think that the point is well made in terms of stopping. And I think that if there is ambiguity about what the project is going to be, then I think stopping it makes sense until such time as they can come and assure us that the number is 1,900 versus 1,300. Because I want to remind folks, with our agreement, one of the conditions of the agreement is that we have basically put ourselves in a position where we are completely unable to object to the plans that they intend to move forward with the county. That's part of the annexation agreement that was signed back last year. And so we basically have a gag order in place with regard to objecting in any forum other than having a discussion about the TIF. And I think that at this point it doesn't make any sense to move forward on the administrative aspects of a TIF if we don't know what the project that we're going to be TIFing is going to look like. That to me is objectionable, given that we started out with a number that we thought we knew. We had plans laid out, and I understand things change. But as a partner in the deal, if there's going to be a change, I'd expect that someone would knock on my door and tell me, "Hey, this is what we're thinking, and this is what we'd like to do." And there may be some wonderful, valid reasons, and maybe we can agree to something. But I don't see how it makes sense for us to advance the infrastructure when the underlying objective isn't known. It's being moved around.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Try not to be a bother, Mr. City Manager, but I am a little confused here tonight. I guess it's because I'm getting too much literature. I've got some correspondence from Mr. Tedesco, and it's dated July 5th, 2018. And basically, he's saying, "Dear party of record and adjourning property owners, this letter is to inform you that the Maryland National Parks and Capital Planning is ready to accept the subject application." And it goes on, and just to paraphrase it, it says that they're asking for approximately an additional 695 residential dwellings. So, I mean, they were asking for this. And it goes back to, is the property 1,200? Or are we talking 1,200, or are we talking 1,900? And those figures differ from correspondence that I got on July 12th, from the lawyer, and also signed off by Ms. Hewitt, who is the chair of the Maryland National Capital Parks and Planning Committee. And this thick packet is dated July 12th, 2017. It's all confusing, and the numbers, when you look at this document versus the document we have here versus the document that the resolution, I don't see the same numbers. That's why I'm confused.
Well, I understand what you're saying. The preliminary plan of subdivisions would be an official act on their part, which where they would stipulate specifically how many units they want when they come to that point. It is feasible, I'm not saying we negotiated this, but it is feasible that somewhere down the line, if the council wants to proceed with this process, with this development, that we could get a covenant stipulation from them, that even if they have approval from the planning board to build 1,900 units, and they can get that without our approval, as we all know, right? That they wouldn't use that for a certain period of years, 20 years, 10 years, or 25 years. Something like that could be negotiated at some point to keep the process going if the council wants to do that. So but I think before we could stop the process and wait till the preliminary plan of subdivision process is initiated to see specifically what they are asking for, because right now they have not officially asked for it, but they've talked about it and sent memorandums and documents out. But in the process, we could talk to them about if you must get approval for 1,900 units, then we would want a covenant with you to where you agree not to exceed 1,300 units for the next 25 years or 30 years or whatever we want, if the council wants to continue with this development. That's one of the things we could do.
I'd like to suggest it, because my concern is that I don't want to lock us into something that we can't undo. And I don't want to get us into a situation where we're looking downstream and we say, wish we hadn't done that on August the 6th, 2018, I wish we had taken another avenue.
The two actions here today, one, the stormwater control is just something that is to our advantage.
Okay, I get that.
We control the permitting process, and the annexation never happens, and it's just a document sitting there. But we control that, and whatever happens, if we enter into this, we're going to seek to control the stormwater management so that we can get the standards to our level. The second issue is a authorization for us to accept the payments, advance payments for the bond, for the financial planning, and the legal fees that we didn't do 2 years ago.
Right.
That cost us $50,000, and now Sadler, who is out of the deal, owes us that money, and we have to proceed.
And that's
And so
another thing I'm worried about.
What I'm doing now is we've gotten the money up front. We're getting all the money up front if the council wants to continue with the development process.
Right.
And so that's what the second action is for, that. Is so that the money has been sent to us, correct me if I'm wrong, John Henry, it's sitting in our accounts, but we haven't utilized it because I don't have the authority to do so without you all telling me. But we've got the money so that if we proceed and we do financial planning and we use the lawyers to manage this situation, that we don't lose money in the process, and we do it on their dime, not ours.
Right, and that's what I had in the back of my mind, because, we had talked about that on Friday. I just didn't want to, articulate it out in the public domain.
Whatever.
I guess it's okay, we could do that.
It's public information.
Right, it's public information, but that's exactly what I was really thinking about, and that's what I want to make sure that we dot all our I's and cross all our T's, so that we don't have a situation like that happen to us again, because that was kind of alarming to find out that we really didn't collect money that we should have collected.
Up front.
Up front, right.
So we are in a position that we can back out of this process at any time we want. If in September we find out that they are in fact pursuing 1,900 units, and they are unwilling to agree to limit that to 1,300 for a period of time that satisfies the council, then you have the absolute right, and correct me if I'm wrong, to not proceed because this is a conditional experience.
Okay, so in other words, if we have a mechanism, and you use the word covenant,
Or agreement,
right, well, whatever, we need to have some sort of a mechanism so that if, in fact, they do seek to do 19 as opposed to do 1,300 units, then that would be a breach of the contract, which we would be able to back out of the contract. Am I correct on that from a legal standpoint?
Assuming that they have something that you have something that they want, you can negotiate a covenant. If there's a covenant on it, it will be binding and run with the land. I'm not certain at this point what that negotiation would look like, but if your question to me is, could the developer voluntarily impose a covenant on the land that restricted their ability to develop it to something less than they might otherwise have? Well, that's what we did at Melford, right?
Right,
so covenants are a mechanism that you can use to do that. The question will be in the negotiation, what are you willing to give up for that? What do you have that they want?
Do we have to give up anything? I mean, why would we want to give up something?
Well, why would they give you a covenant?
To protect ourselves, to make sure that we don't.
That's
we
why
don't have that
you,
additional
right,
increase.
that's why you would want it. But the
Right.
question is, why would they give it to you? Right? So there has to be, there's going to have to be a negotiation for that.
Police coverage, public works, public works.
Well, if you enact,
That's
you
what they're
have that
getting.
obligation anyway. That's not
Yeah.
a negotiable thing. You'll have to do those things if you enact. So,
Okay.
right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question of staff. If in fact, thank you, Mr. King, for coming up. Always
We'll
good to
see.
hear your
This may be
voice.
a sit it out and listen to the experts.
If in fact they don't, as our city attorney mentioned, the developer doesn't agree to the number of units that we would propose that we do not want them to exceed, for instance, 1,900 units. If they say 1,300, and I understand that they've come back for an additional 695. If in fact this developer doesn't like our terms, can they, and say, they just say, okay, we're going to back away from the annexation completely, meaning the developer backs away, as well as the city. The partnership is ruined, not ruined, but let's just say severed. The ties are severed. Can this developer go and just remain as it is today outside of the city of Bowie and continue to build without our involvement?
Yes.
So
They
whether,
can continue their project. If you choose to not play, they can continue to build what they want to build.
okay,
If your
1,900,
concern is limiting the number of units, the only way you have a strong argument in the fight is to continue with what you've negotiated in your annexation agreement.
correct.
If you wish to forego that, you're saying you're giving up everything that you have negotiated so far. And there won't be any need then for, if you choose then to not pursue.
So my question is, again, this developer is going to build with or without the city of Bowie. Is that an answer that you?
That is a
haven't?
reasonable assumption.
Okay. And if they're not with the city of Bowie, they would have to go directly to the county council, the county and thus far, and they can build as many units as they so choose. Without, meaning with the county approval,
They have the same
the-
process to go through.
meaning with the county's approval. We would not be a part of that at all,
You have always maintained
an opinion.
the right to offer your comments on projects adjacent to the city to the county council. And the county council acts, if you're more connected with them than we at staff are, they can receive your recommendation and act favorably. They can
So
receive
this-
your recommendation and ignore you.
This would give us some leverage or open up negotiations.
give you a
to-
voice. If it's
It
going
would
to
give
come
us a
into the
voice
city,
to opening it, okay.
It becomes more,
And today
it
we're,
becomes something over what you have a say. If it remains in the unincorporated part of the county,
okay.
Bowie has no say over that. You've got an
Exactly.
opinion, but you have no say.
And my last question is, other development projects here within the city of Bowie, within the municipality, incorporated part of Bowie, such as Northridge, Whitmore Estates, trying to think of some of them that are more recent. Have we entered, does the city of Bowie control the stormwater management as we're proposing to do here at South Lake?
Yes, and most of those, they are
Yes,
built.
we do.
Okay. And how have those relationships worked to where we control? So we receive dollars to provide maintenance or
Well, if you look in the budget, there are numerous special tax
Special
districts.
taxing districts.
Where we set up the ability to tax the residents and specifically maintain those stormwater systems, which are
Stormwater
very
system.
expensive.
and roads and
And we do that, we maintain the roads, public roads with our,
so this is nothing new.
no,
Correct.
Okay.
no,
All
it's
right.
not.
That's
It's a standard procedure if you're intending to annex.
okay. That's where I wanted to go with this. Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. King. Thank you, staff. Thank you.
Thank you all for your hard work, Mr. King and city staff and everyone up here. I just wanted to clarify, so we can pass Resolution 56-18 and choose not to pass Resolutions 57-18 tonight.
They are not connected in any
Any-
legislative way. They're connected simply by the geography to which it
What we're talking about. And so we could, so saying that, it is in our best interest to control the stormwater management for this area, because right now, we don't have an annexation agreement fully in place. So if that never happens, then we don't have to control their stormwater management. We don't control the stormwater management. However, our stormwater management is are much higher than what is surrounding adjacent areas. So it would be in our best interest that we just go ahead with our Resolution 5618 so that we have control over the stormwater management. And then if you all, the rest of the council, has issues with Resolution 5718, we can put that off until after we see the actual development plans from the developer.
Well, we can set it aside, and that would technically stop the process.
Okay, but we don't want to
And
stop.
Until the preliminary plan of subdivision comes out and you decide whether to take any action or at all.
Now, for Resolution 5718, I think you said this very clearly when you started, there is nothing that is going to change
That's right.
between,
When we
from
get to
when we walked in.
5718
Completely
is simply
separate.
set up a way
Sure.
for them to pay us in
Exactly.
advance for the expert advisors we use to review the application we've received.
Exactly. And I just feel like some of my colleagues were meshing to.
And that also does not obligate you to
anything.
approving it. It
Right.
simply pays for the experts
To be able to
to
do
the
it so
analysis
that we
we can then
don't,
bring back to you. Pays the cost of getting it
so
done.
we don't lose money as we did
Exactly.
previously.
That's right.
Okay, so I feel
Well,
like a couple of, so let me just finish, gentlemen? Okay. So I feel like some of my colleagues may be meshing two issues on the same subject matter, but two separate technical issues. Am I right?
You're correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
I just want to clarify that if you don't, you're certainly entitled to defer 5718, but you will have to make a decision then if you want your bond counsel and your financial advisors and your other professionals to continue working, because if you don't authorize the fee agreement, and they're going to continue working, which is fine, I mean, you can do that however you want, but you're going to pay for that without having a guarantee that the developer is going to reimburse you. So in a sense, it could stop the progress forward because your experts will not be being paid out by the developer any longer.
Well, absent the authority to pay them,
Right.
then I would have to pay them from somewhere else in the budget, and there are no lines in the budget. So that would effectively stop the process, because I'm not going to use money that hasn't been appropriated. And so that's what I meant. This would be de facto stopping the Carrington process.
Staff is recommending we set up a plan so that they can pay forward the cost of examining the stormwater plan.
Right.
That, anything related to that has, the annexation decision to go forward or not go forward still remains 100% the city
That's your
council's
choice.
decision. The decision to do the TIF still remains 100% city council's decision
Exactly.
to go forward. So the only thing that would happen if this is approved is the staff can set up the necessary administrative thing so that they can advance fund to
They've already given us, they've already put the
examine,
fees
the
up.
stormwater thing. And we still have I think what is it, September, October, when they're coming forward with a preliminary
September.
plan? And at that time, they have to come in with whether they're gonna have numbers or changes or not. And at that time, council can decide whether they want to continue. I mean, if the numbers are different
Yes.
and you don't like them, you have an immediate option there. So it just seems to me that what staff is asking to do doesn't impede anything or limit any cutoff option that we have
No, it doesn't.
in the future.
No,
It
I
just
mean,
allows us to go forward.
they're paying for the analysis. They're
Right,
willing to
right.
if you allow me to accept the money.
No, I had asked before. I had asked before.
Okay.
Okay. All right. I think I have it. I think I understand it now. Okay. 5618, you're asking us to authorize that the city have control of the stormwater management. That's all you're asking, right?
Well, if it comes in the city, you have to do it.
Is that correct?
It's allowing us to pay for the responsibility we're going to take.
No, 5618
5618.
allows us to have the stormwater management, gives us the control over the stormwater management as far as our specifications, because our specifications, our requirements are going to be greater than if the project was not in the city of Bowie. Is that true or false?
Well, what it is this.
What?
The 5618, the developer stipulates, he has agreed that we will control the permitting, that we will be able to establish stormwater special district, taxing districts, in all aspects of it, and he is agreeing to it. What we're asking you to do is to let me enter into that agreement, which is separate from the annexation agreement, and that's all.
Okay, so that's
He just
5618.
agreed to what we pressed upon them, that if we're gonna have an annexation, that we have to control this, and he's saying, okay.
Right.
That's all that letter is. There's
Okay, I get,
nothing more.
I got that. So that's
Okay.
5618. That's the stormwater.
5718,
No, 50, wait a minute now, let me
Okay,
see
go
if I
ahead.
got it straight. 5718, all that resolution does is allow our people to get paid.
exactly,
I have no problem.
that's all.
All right, any other questions? Mr. Wolf?
Are we going to step through 5718 in similar fashion?
I can talk about 5718 now. I thought I was going to simplify things to take them one piece at a time. But if you want, I can proceed to 5718, and then we can go back and, you need to act upon them separately.
Okay.
So, Mr. Mayor, you want to talk about them? I thought we clarified what they were, what they do.
My understanding is what staff is asking for tonight is approval for you to sign an agreement.
Sign it,
Correct.
yes,
And
sir.
that agreement would allow the examination of the stormwater process that they're gonna pay for.
They were, yes, they were agreed to do it.
Whatever happens to that, it still's not gonna affect, if we choose not to annex this property, then it's dead. If we
It's
choose
over.
not to do the TIF, it's in. But then it's gonna go back to the county, and they're gonna do whatever the county.
And the other.
But nothing that you were asking for tonight impacts or impedes our ability to do anything in the future.
We have received the TIF application from the developer. We have to analyze it. We have to pay for the financial planners and the legal guys to review it. They've given us the money up
We pay
front.
for it or they pay for it.
They've already given us the money up front. This is authorization for me.
Mr. Chairman, may I clarify that, please?
Right.
Let me get into it and give you the background here.
So they're risking their $50,000.
No, that is not a correct statement.
Say it.
Our application process requires that when they bring us the application, they bring us a check for $10,000. They did that. That's been deposited into the general fund of the city of Bowie. So we have a $10,000 check from which to pay for any advice we need to get going. We know we need more advice than $10,000 can buy. Our policy allows us to set up fee escrow accounts. These are accounts where the development team pays money to the escrow holder, and the escrow holder handles the payment of all the bills. So that money does not come into the city's control. All of the advisors' expenses related to this project are then paid for from that escrow fund. And as the amount that establishes the fund is depleted, there is a requirement to replenish that fund. So far, that we have two funds established, one to pay our financial advisor, the Davenport and Company, one to pay our attorney, that's bond counsel, and a city attorney that provides the municipal advice necessary in this TIF process. The city has received our $10,000 check to get the process going. We're not going to go further without knowing that we're getting our advisors paid. A $15,000 check has been received and is ready to go into escrow to handle the Funk and Bolton fees.
It is in escrow.
We are waiting for a $10,000
It's in escrow.
payment to come in that would then be applied to the Davenport portion.
Let me just clarify.
If you don't sign this letter authorizing, if the city manager is not authorized to sign it, then that money gets returned.
The escrow account will not get charged, actually, unless the developer is going to be invoiced directly by your financial advisor and by us. Our bills will be redacted as they would be for anybody else to shield attorney-client privilege information. However, we will invoice them directly. They will pay those invoices only if they don't pay them within 30 days, and you'll see this in the resolution. Would the escrow fund be charged? Otherwise, it sits there. If it ever is charged because they fail to pay the invoice, then they have an obligation to replenish it within, I think, 15 days or whatever Mr. King just said.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
I have some questions, since we've kind of crossed over into 57 here. Some questions for you on that. You say you've received the application. You told me you got the deposit, or the application fee. What's the estimated amount for the TIF amount?
It's not publicly disclosable at this time. We aren't at a point yet where we've accepted the numbers.
Okay. Can you share that with me elsewhere?
We can talk about it in a non-public session. We are moving, the speed with which we're moving is going to be directly related to the actions you take tonight to get that into the public realm.
Mm-hmm. So, from the standpoint of the financial advisors and the bond, how much do we anticipate that running? Unrelated to the TIF amount, but for...
I did not bring those detailed documents with me, and that's not something I've committed to memory.
Okay. There was a comment made earlier about they can proceed with or without us, if we're not in the city. Well, I have a little concern about that, because part of the whole idea of a TIF is the concept is that but for the TIF, we wouldn't see this project happening. And that's kind of one of our policy statements, or one of our policy guidelines for being willing to engage in a TIF. And if they're going to go with or without us, I think that means speaks to the issue of then maybe a TIF isn't necessary. So I'd be careful about how we characterize whether or not, what happens with this project with that. The other thing I want to comment on is that based on the agreement, we have no say currently in this property because we negotiated that away. So
That's an incorrect characterization, sir.
Okay.
I believe the comment in there that allows for a test of reasonableness does provide you with authority to comment on it. Because the number of units that you've agreed to is 1,388. That's what's in the annexation agreement. The number of units that's approved at the county is 1,294. Staff has not provided to you their opinion of what is reasonable. Certainly at that appropriate time, staff will be delivering that to you, but it's up to you to ultimately determine what is reasonable. So you do have a great deal of authority in there. The second part is, I would disagree slightly with you in the characterization that if the developer wants to proceed, the TIF isn't relevant. The TIF is relevant to proceeding now. Were he to choose a different path, it would be on a different timeline, most likely a much longer one, but to the same outcome. So you do have some control over what happens there through the tax increment financing process. And that includes looking at the mix of units. And when one is increasing, let us assume for a moment that the rumor of increased units becomes fact. It is not. Well, let's assume it does. Those units have to come out of something there, and that all has to be figured into the TIF. What would happen is, if that increase proceeds, and the TIF number, I can tell you that the residential count in the TIF is a different number between 1294 and 1388. It's 1,335. So that falls within stuff we know we've at least conceptually agreed is there. If that number gets bigger, none of the information we have seen, either in the first iteration or the current iteration, is likely to it's going to create a lot of discussion at the staff level, and we are equally certain it will create a lot of discussion when it reaches you.
So we've made a point here that nothing here advances the cause of accepting the TIF. I would disagree with that, because anytime we're moving forward with the administrative side of things, that does advance the cause. And I would also say that we're looking at a subject here. We made a point that the numbers were going to manifest themselves soon enough on what those numbers are, whether it's 1,900 or what have you, and that we'd be seeing that in September. So if I don't move on this at all this month, and if I move on it after I hear those numbers, then all I've done is delayed the project for a month or two, correct? This is a project that's been hanging around for a decade or more in various forms, various owners and what have you. What is the present urgency that says I have to have this now? If my research into the details sits in abeyance until such time as I find out what the unit count is, to me, I look at this as, I thought I was going to the beach for vacation. Now somebody is telling me we're going to the mountains, and we're still talking about, finding the money for it. And the question is, yeah, but we just changed direction here. I thought we were going to the beach. And it doesn't make sense to continue pursuing, my leave and everything else when I don't know if I really want to go to the mountains. And to me, this is, it doesn't make a lot of sense to put people's time, energy, and money and effort, whether it's our money or theirs, into advancing a project that we're not sure that we're comfortable with. And I don't think too many people are comfortable with, bouncing up 35% on this. So I find that to be, very disconcerting that we would move forward on the administration of these sorts of things when we don't know what the final objective is going to be. And so I think that, at the very least, we ought to postpone these, deliberations and the vote until such time as we know what direction we're going to, because at the end of the day, the way I read this agreement, it's quite clear. We don't have any ability to change or to lobby anybody on zoning. We don't have any ability to go and speak against 1,900 at the county. All we have are these little incremental steps that are associated with moving forward with the TIF. And if you move forward with the TIF right now, you have no leverage, no nothing when it comes to having a discussion about what the unit count is. And so we'll find ourselves in a position where we continue for the next 6 months or however long it's going to take on a process that may not be worth the effort.
May I translate a question to the city attorney? Okay.
I think it's time to get a motion on the table. If no other questions, let's see if we can get a motion on the table, see if we can come to a conclusion on that. It's your district.
Right.
What do you want to do?
Okay. I'd like to make a motion, just one clarification to the city manager.
Well,
What we just
Wait a
heard,
minute, hold on a second.
Quick question. Do we have to check and see if anybody wants to speak to 5718 for public
we
discussion?
got to take them separately.
Yeah, we had one person speaking that said no comment.
That was on 56. That was on 56-18, not 57. So if the motion's related just to 56,
Can't you make a motion on both?
okay.
You can only make a
You-
motion
action.
sequentially. They're separate. Am I correct? They're separate.
Okay.
Okay.
But Mr. Dufour had a point, I believe the mayor has confirmed it. There is someone who wishes to speak at public hearing on Resolution 57. So as a staff member, I would not ask you for action on that until after you've had your public hearing.
All right. Is it-
But you have had your public hearing on 56.
Right,
Yes.
right. Okay. I'd like to make a
Wait a
motion.
minute, let me make sure I got this right. So, we have one speaker on 5718, yeah, okay.
And there's nobody on 5618. Well, we did have one on 5618.
They're on the same one. They're together. They're on the same sheet.
My speakers list says here on 5618 and 5718.
Yes.
He signed up under the same sheet. I had both resolutions on the same sheet. So I thought they were gonna be presented as one and then made the motions and have it separate.
All right,
My
I think
mistake.
we,
Okay. So can we make a motion on 5618?
You should do the resolution separately because it is likely, there is at least some likelihood that you will have votes that are inconsistent with adoption or rejection of the resolutions. So if you do them as a single motion, it's likely there will be confusion as a result, and I would recommend that you do them separately.
And I was just going to say, we do the votes separately, but we've discussed everything together and confused each other to no end at this point. So why don't we let Mr. Swank speak before we go into the motions for 56 and 57 separately? Make sense?
Makes sense to me too. Just let him speak. Mr. Swain, come forward. Mr. Swain, come forward for
All right.
57,
all right.
18.
Welcome, sir. Sorry for the confusion.
Thank you. I just want to make some comments. Many, many hours going through this, trying to understand it, and I think it's a great idea because the city's going to undertake this rigorous analysis to ensure that the proposed project satisfies the but-for test, and that's, of course, is why the project should not occur but for the TIF funding, and that this is paid for in large part by the TIF applicant, and I think that's great. The city views TIF as the last course of action and to consider, and it's used only in resources, excuse me, as a last resource, in the last resource circumstances. As you all move forward, the group has, my group I represent, the Citizens for Accountable Government, look forward to the 2 public hearings that must be scheduled, one for introductory meetings, and one for the next city public hearing on the decision on that item. We thought that you're getting this incremental funding in place to be able to pay for this and receive the monies from the contractor and get paid early is a great program, and look forward to you moving forward with this action. That's all.
I have a question. Mr. Swank?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. So you're in favor, you're not opposed to either one of these, is that correct?
Neither one of them.
Thank you. Okay. I move for the passage of Resolution R 5618.
Second by Mr. Marcus. Any question on the motion? Everybody understand the motion? All in favor?
Well, you can explain if you want
Huh?
to. You can explain it if you want to.
Y'all can explain it at
Every-
home, I'll be at home. while
Wait a
you're
minute. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Yes, 6-1.
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
go.
I move for the passage of Resolution R 5718.
Moved and second. Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Oh, 6-1. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, I have one thing I'd like to add.
Oh.
Tomorrow, this is a quick one. Tomorrow is National Night Out,
Yes, sir.
6 to 8. Now, you all got your new shirts there, so we
Well.
want to see you out there wearing your shirts, okay? Thank you very much.
Will do.
Yeah, is there a color?
You make your own choice.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, listening public, for sitting through this evening with us. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn
To executive session.
to an executive session to discuss a personnel matter.
Second.
Second, all right, any question on the motion? All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous. Good night, folks.
Yes, we do have an exec session, everybody. Yeah.